So, this is episode 4, which means I have already surpassed the amount of episodes I recorded the last time I tried something like this, which was 3.5 years ago, nearly 4. It'll be 4 in December. This is just before the NBA season started, when the Bucks won. So, we've already gone past that. So, today's topic, as a lot of you who follow me across Twitter and TikTok will know, I place an extreme amount of importance and value among players who have pace and power. Physically imposing players, essentially. And someone made a funny tweet the other day in response to, I can't remember what I tweeted. It might have been something to do with Mbappe. It was, give me freedom, give me fire, give Mus pace and power or he retires. So it got me thinking. I am essentially known as the guy who is infatuated with pace and power beyond anything else when it comes to my analysis and valuing of football players. And it's funny because some of my players actually lack pace and power at this point. I still love watching Neymar. He can't run to save his life. You know, Verratti, loved watching him when he was in Paris. He also couldn't run to save his life. He literally looked like he was running with a beer belly, even though he was skinny as a stick. So, I don't know, it's a weird one. But nonetheless, I value players with pace and power over anything else which players can bring. So naturally, it comes to those. So I got to thinking, why do I value pace and power above everything else? Similar to the playmaking thing last week. And I thought, yeah, I'd make a video explaining on my infatuation with it. No rant this week, thankfully, because I haven't seen any stupid tacticals trying to downplay people. I mean, I have seen occasional stupidity from them when they refuse to admit they're wrong, but, you know, what can you do? So, for a start, the first thing which I view as a reason as to why pace and power is hugely important is it makes it significantly easier to fit, to scale, to pick you up from one situation and drop you into another. There are certain traits in every sport which will always carry regardless. For example, in boxing, speed will always carry regardless. No matter what weight class you go to, whatever, it will always carry. A good jab, example, a good defense, stuff like that. American football, regardless of whatever situation you go to, if you're fast and you can run and you're strong, similar to normal football, you're going to have some success wherever, regardless of you go, even if you have good route running or not. In basketball, shooting, defense, passing. Those three things will always translate regardless. In football, pace and power there's a few others, of course, which is what makes up winning players, like I said a few weeks ago, but pace and power is one of those things which will carry to your situation regardless of wherever you happen to be, right? There will always be a place for you as long as you have prerequisite amounts of pace and power at the higher table of football, as long as you are not, I have to choose the right word here, having a slow functioning brain when it comes to decision making on a football pitch. On a football pitch, I said football pitch before that gets clipped. So, I thought the first place I thought I'd start with this is if you have more athleticism, it's easier to fit you anywhere. And it's easier to fit you with more pieces. So to do this, I decided to start off with probably the two most well-known football players ever, in Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. So if we look at them in their physical apexes, Messi's actual peak as a player doesn't come until a couple of years after his physical apex, but he's still there or thereabouts. But that's because Messi turned into a complete heliocentric monster. But in Cristiano Ronaldo's case, his physical peak also coincided with his peak as a football player. So with Messi, his physical peak was up until around 2013 when he popped his hamstring. He had a slight downturn, but he still had enough athleticism until he blew his knee up in 2015. But with Messi at his physical peak, he could fit with literally anyone. So I decided to go through. So Sami Eto'o, he's a guy who could play left, right, striker, play within the penalty box. He was a razor-sharp striker, link play, wall play, going behind. Easy fit with Messi. It was genuinely so simple. Or whether you want to look at Thierry Henry, who just played as a left winger for Lionel Messi. A left winger, just make that running behind, take guys on one-on-one. And how did that work? That was absolutely beautiful. Henry was scoring goals for fun in that, especially in the first season of which Messi peaked physically, right? Well, Messi began to peak as a player, and he was still fine physically. Then we want to look at Ibrahimovic. The fit as a whole on Barcelona wasn't excellent, right? Obviously, I think they only lost one league game all season, had 95 points or something ridiculous like that. Might have been higher, considering the levels that they were hitting that season. And they still got to the Champions League semi-final, and they really should have gotten to the final had it not been for some strange officiating and Mourinho's strange mix of luck mixed in with it. But again, Ibrahimovic was still fine. Did it maximise him as a player? No. It didn't actually maximise him as a player, but he was still good enough to score a goal every other game, and his link play and the ability to be a wall and be a recipient of Messi's excellence, and they could play off each other. There's a reason why some people actually think that 2010 Messi is his peak version as a player, and partially it would have been due to Ibrahimovic having an extreme presence on the pitch and taking attention away from him. So again, a lovely fit there. Then you have David Villa coming in. Again, this is another guy who plays within the penalty box, but can also go wider, also go in behind, and he's a fantastic finisher, and he's a guy who stretches the defence. Again, Lionel Messi fits perfectly with a guy like that. Pedro, hard worker, hard runner, goes in behind. Good dribbler, comes short for combination play, and then goes long. Again, that's a wonderful fit with Messi. So he's fitting with pretty much any type of forward piece that you can have there. Even Alexis, right? Alexis was a failure, I think, when it comes to overall as a player. He's a black hole, he's a poor decision maker, and he's largely inefficient. But on the whole, he's still fit with Messi fine enough because of the combination play, because of the fact he was almost forced into releasing the ball quicker than he probably would have liked when he was at Barcelona, due to various reasons, predominantly because of the fact that's just the way they played and he would have held bench if he didn't. So again, Messi, Alexis, that was a fine fit. Like, that's probably the closest you got to Messi not fitting with an attacking superstar in his physical apex. And then, say if you look at Cristiano Ronaldo in his physical apex. So, and that's even without talking about midfielders, because Messi's naturally an easy fit because of the fact that he was raised in La Masia with Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets, even Yaya Touré a bit earlier on. So, and then you look at Cristiano Ronaldo and his physical apex. So from here, we're probably looking at 2007 or 8 to about 2012, 13-ish. So before, even if you really want to stretch it, we can go to 2014 to include another teammate, just again to prove the point. So if we start off with Rooney, who's probably his most memorable partner that he had at Manchester United. Rooney was a false nine doing everything. You'd cover the gaps for Ronaldo running behind, and you'd play Ronaldo in behind. That was a natural, super simple fit. He was a great playmaker, plugged all the holes for Ronaldo, stuff like that. And he did all the day work as well. Tevez, balancer, goes in behind, link-up play, drawing a dog play. And again, he opens up the space for Ronaldo to attack, and he was very willing to dump off the ball to Ronaldo. So again, that's another guy, super easy fit with Ronaldo. And then you look at, say, this is a totally different type of player now when they brought in Dimitar Berbatov. Berbatov was a super static guy. He was someone who would play within the width of the box. He was someone who's very comfortable within the box. You'd rarely see him venture beyond 25 yards from goal. Usually it was more so 20 when the game was in settled play. If that, probably we're looking at more like 15-ish, which is why a lot of his goals came in closer range. His excellent technique came when it came in semi-transitions due to his wonderful ball passing and his ability to kill the ball with a first touch. Unlike almost any player you've ever seen. But again, Ronaldo fit in perfectly with him as well, because he was in the box and they were creating and they were combining together. Because again, they were both good fits together. And then he moves on from United and he goes to Real Madrid. And his strike partners, so he had multiple partners there. It was a few trios there. He had Di Maria, he had Ozil, he had Higuain, he had Benzema, and then he had Adebayor in there as well, and he had Gareth Bale later on as well. Ozil, I'm not sure if I mentioned him. But if we go through those one by one, we start with Higuain. Higuain was a poacher. Period, point blank. I don't care what anyone else says. I know that some people like to glorify and maximise what he used to be. He was a poacher. Ronaldo fit in perfectly with him. He scored goals alongside him because of like Ronaldo's scoring bag at that point was so ridiculously diverse. It didn't even matter what was going on. He could do anything He could do anything when it comes to goal scoring, from distance, from mid-range, from in close. Higuain would sometimes vacate the area in semi-transitions, and that would be about it. Outside of that, Ronaldo was pretty much exclusively on the left. And there's a reason why he ended up playing striker at certain points as well. Benzema, I don't really need to go into this. This is Rooney on steroids with better playmaking and better dribbling and probably about equal levels of strength when Ronaldo played with him. Not later on when Benzema was at his respective peak. That was a beautiful match in heaven. Di Maria, again, this is a guy who fit perfectly with Ronaldo. Crosses, release the balls early in transition, gives you moments of maverick quality every single game without fail. And again, fantastic player. He fit with Ronaldo easily. Mesut Ozil, who some people call Ronaldo's best partner. I disagree with that, but let's humour it for a second. He set up Ronaldo for a ridiculous amount of goals because of the fact that Ronaldo would come inside and so Ozil would slide over into the left half space. Ronaldo goes inside, he knows. It's almost actually quite similar to the synergy which Mbappe and Neymar had. It's just that Neymar's doing it right-footed and Ozil's doing it left-footed. And the trajectory of the pass is different. So Ozil almost led it for Ronaldo to go onto, whereas Neymar would lead the pass into Mbappe, regardless. But Ozil would do that, scoop passes, whatever, and those two fit together perfectly as well. And then if we go to Adebayor, this isn't chronological, I'm aware. Adebayor was a guy who was a big wall, big centre forward, again, drops deeper, vacates the space, wins second balls, wins the knockdown. Ronaldo gets onto it, and a bang, they fit together perfectly as well. And then even Gareth Bale, before Ronaldo lost his legs, again, we're talking about physical apex here, 2014, so slight signs of physical decline, but we're going to go along with it anyway. Those two fit together fine as well because of the fact that Bale was willing to put the ball into the box, Ronaldo was willing to go across, put the ball into the box, all those different types of things. And again, it made the fit absolutely smooth and seamless, so those guys would instantly fit together. People were crying about how difficult the ego fit was going to be and someone breaking Ronaldo's record and how he was going to take that for the world transfer fee. And ultimately, it was a non-starter after about a month when Bale settled into Madrid. It wasn't even anything to do with the fit on the pitch. He just wasn't comfortable in Madrid yet because he barely spoke the bloody language. Within 2 years, he was fine. And then, so that's up to that point because of the fact that he could do anything. Now, if we go back to Lionel Messi. Messi in 2019, which some people view as his peak, I think they're silly because of the fact that, I think if you take any Messi from 2009 to 2015, that tie against Liverpool, they do not lose. Because instead of Messi creating chances for his teammates, Messi would have gone further and he would have scored himself, right? He would have just broken open the game and he would have made clear-cut big chances either for himself or his teammates as opposed to playing them through, right? When I say big chance, I mean he'd be going through and setting them up for a chance which is literally impossible to miss because that's just what he did when he was at his physical apex. So by default, 2019 Messi can't be his peak. And the reason why I'm choosing it, and you'll see the same, and you see similar for Ronaldo as well, is that it shows how athleticism allows you to fit with others as well as also overlaying into the peak. So if we look at Messi in 2019. At this point, to really be himself, to really be the best version of himself, he needs certain conditions on the pitch. He can't play with a striker who is constantly running him behind. He needs someone who's going to give him that wall option, which often a lot of the best strikers who go behind do that as well. He needs someone he's able to bounce 1-2s off, so he can come inside and not have to use as much physical strength, and not having to rely on his now dwindling athleticism. He needs a right back who's going to overlap him. Now, Messi didn't need that when he was at his physical apex because in fact he could just go by. He wouldn't need someone else to open up the space for him. And he also needed a guy who's going to run him behind on the left wing. Now, Barcelona was stupid. For whatever reason, they didn't sign a guy who was actually going to run him behind on the left wing. Instead, they signed Dembele, who's a Volta V player, who still doesn't run him behind, even now. And he's 28 or however old he is. But instead, they fixed that issue by having Jordi Alba running behind. So again, he needed a running run behind, a wall striker, and an overlap. He needed those things to become a 50-goal, 30-assist player, which is fine, right? That's Messi at that point still had a serious argument as the best player in the world. So you do those things for him so he can be that as opposed to making him do it in suboptimal conditions. But again, he needed those things in place because of the fact that he now couldn't just break open an entire team by himself. He needed those things to make him capable of carrying an entire... And Ernesto Valverde did a very good job of that. And it's why Barcelona fans are flatly stupid for having such an agenda against him. Because he is ultimately the reason why a lot of you think that Messi peaked at a certain point in time. You put him under a different coach, he's not reaching those levels because of the fact that at that point he dwindled athleticism and he couldn't do everything by himself at that particular point. So, then we look at Cristiano Ronaldo, 2018. This is when the Cristiano GOAT talks were they were definitely at their strongest. He won the Euros in 2016. He just won the 3-peat in the Champions League. He just scored a World Cup hat-trick. He scored 4 goals in the first 2 World Cup games. He was frankly fantastic in 2018. But, at this point in time, he'd faded athletically. Now he couldn't fit with a poacher like Higuain. Now he couldn't fit with another running room behind in Gareth Bale. He needed a 10, a creator in the form of Isco, and he needed a false 9 guy who will draw attention away from the defence, and so he wouldn't have to worry about bringing the ball up the field, so he wouldn't have to worry about chance creation. The only thing which he has to worry about is getting into goal-scoring positions and burying those chances, which he did, which ultimately might have been the way to maximise him all along when he was younger, just allowing him to be a final third destructive machine. That's a whole different conversation because of what he was at his peak, which is inarguably one of the 10 best players of all time. Some of you might take that the wrong way, but I think that's a compliment regardless. This isn't about GOAT talks and stuff like that. So he could no longer play with any type of player. He needed to have those certain conditions in place to be the best version of himself at that particular point in time, which is what allowed him to still be a top 3 to 5 player in the world. So, as exceptional as he was, he still needed those conditions in place, which is why pace and power is such an important thing, because of the fact that when you lose athleticism, now you can no longer fit with anyone, and it makes it harder for them to fit around you. So even if you are one of the best, it makes the team construction harder. And again, the reason why I chose those 2 years is because those teams had immense amounts of collective success that season. Real Madrid won the Champions League, and I think they finished second or third in La Liga. Barcelona won the league, and they got to the semi-finals of the Champions League. So those 2 teams both had immense levels of success that season. They won trophies, they won big trophies. But ultimately, partially due to the shortcomings of their players, of their star players, which they had to build around, their shortcomings due to the lack of athleticism, it led to them failing in later points. For example, if you put 2012 Ronaldo on that Real Madrid team in 2018, I believe they win the league. The midfield, because the depth now at this point was worse, so it relied more on top level players. So it relied more on the actual starters, because they didn't have players thriving as much in the secondary roles as they did before. For example, they lost Morata, who was a great piece. James Rodriguez was no longer the same. He left to Bayern Munich, and all of a sudden now you lose 2 huge bench pieces, huge guys who were of immense quality in that sense. So now you're left on a dwindling physically Ronaldo, and ultimately he saved himself the Champions League, and he was peaking at those particular points in time. So those guys, even though they had immense amount of success, it didn't maximize the squad as a whole, which is why they didn't do as well across all the competitions like they would have. Whereas if they had their peak, I believe that those guys both lead their team to troubles at that particular point in time. It's quite sad, honestly, that especially in Ronaldo's case, his best versions of this team all came when he was dwindling physically. But with Messi, it only happened with Argentina. His best versions physically also coincided with the best versions of Barcelona. Ronaldo didn't get that, regardless. Maybe he got that at United to a degree, but not to the same level at which he would have at Madrid, because he's now a better player at Madrid. So that is the first element of why. So those are just simple examples as to why those players are better, because of their athleticism, because it allows them to fit with other pieces, and it gives the squad more general flexibility in terms of how they can build around you, as opposed to having to get pieces in and build and make the team function in certain ways to cover for your shortcomings as an individual. So that is that. So the next part is of why, from a team standpoint, I value it so high, and to a lesser degree a player. It makes the team's floor higher. So for some of you who followed other sports, and it's a term which has somewhat come over here as well, floor and ceiling. So it's very self-explanatory, but I'll explain it anyway. So floor is the absolute lowest level which your team can reach, right? You touch the floor, that's as low as you can go in your house. The ceiling is as high as you can go in a conceivable room without hitting your head, right? So floor is lowest possible level, ceiling is highest possible level, realistically. Obviously, that's not accounting for injuries and things like that. So let's start with the player example. So let's look at Mbappe in 2018, and let's look at Neymar in 2022-23. So Mbappe's floor at that particular point in time, even if his decision making was off, even if his dribbling was off, which was rare because he was still super fluid, but let's humour it, and even if his finishing was off and his final actions were off, he was still a threat. You had to worry about him going in behind. He was always going to pin you back, which makes his floor as a player higher than a guy, say, like Neymar in 2022-23, who, if his dribbling was off, as rare as it was, if his passing was off, as rare as it is, if his decision-making is off, which isn't as rare as you'd probably like it to be, but still exceptional regardless, one guy's more worrying than the other. Because you know that the other guy, he can go in behind, and he can trip over his own foot. But if he goes in behind 10 times a game, one time he's going to mess it up. Even if he messes it up, one time he's going to mess it up so bad that it ends up into something good. Whereas Neymar, because he's deeper, because he can't go past players anymore, things like that, his floor as a player is low, and he's more likely to drop a 3 out of 10 when it comes to his absolute worst level as a player. And then the ceiling as a player is also increased. For example, 2018 Mbappe, you get something like the World Cup game against Argentina, which was the single best, most impressive individual performance at that World Cup. Whereas Neymar's best performance is something like Dijon, where they're about equal. You probably give the edge to Neymar because of the fact that he was more controlling things, but even then he was a bit too direct and things like that. The reason why Neymar was better that season is ultimately he was largely more consistent and Mbappe improved decision making. This isn't a Neymar and Mbappe thing, but it's just I'm making a point. So one's floor is higher than the other, and their ceilings are of comparable level, right? Neymar was better than Mbappe that season, to clarify. Neymar in 2018 was the best player in the world. But the point is about your floor versus your ceiling. 2018 to 23, then we take, that was just 2018. Obviously 23 Neymar, what's his best performance? Probably Lille. Yeah, probably Lille, the 7-1 game where I think he had like 2 goals and 3 assists or something ridiculous. Or 1 goal and 4 assists. I don't remember exactly. But that's great, but again, that's somewhat dependent on someone else because of the fact that he needed someone else to do the extra running and legwork for him. So again, floors versus ceilings. The extra athleticism gave Mbappe the higher floor and the higher ceiling in both of those iterations. The reason why I use those is because of the fact that Neymar was clearly still a top 3 player in the world, but he was no longer himself. And Mbappe was a top 5 to 10 player in the world, but he wasn't the player he is now. So that's the reason for using those 2 specific examples. As a team, on the other hand, you can only be so bad if you have a bunch of speed up top. Like, genuinely, there is only a certain level of how bad you can be if you have a bunch of speed. Like, let's say, for example, let's take Liverpool's example from last season. Mo Salah, Darwin Núñez, Luis Diaz. Salah declined athletically, absolutely. But if we take Darwin and Diaz, those are 2 guys who, let's be honest, they're not the sharpest tools in the shed. No, like they're up here, like they're not the best decision makers, particularly. I don't even know who's the worst decision maker, to be honest, right? Like Diaz does some brain dead stuff, but then so does Núñez. Like, they're both just a bit daft, really, aren't they? But because of the threat that they hold, the speed at which they go in behind, this general chaos which they cause due to their athleticism, their pace, their power, all those different things which make them just a general headache for defenders to deal with, it makes them hard. It makes them incredibly difficult to hack and incredibly difficult for teams to actually nullify. And ultimately, we saw the end result of that, which was Liverpool suffered a bunch of injuries last season, and they still got 80-something points. What did they finish? 84? 85? I don't remember exactly, but 80-something. And had they not got a bunch of injuries, because I think Trent missed time, I think Alisson missed time, Szoboszlai I think missed time, a bunch of guys, Alexis McAllister missed some time, I think around the winter. All these guys missed a bunch of time. Even, I think Núñez missed, Salah definitely missed some time because of AFCON. Like, everyone missed some time at a particular point in the season. But ultimately, they still managed to finish there because of the fact that up top, they had guys who created chaos and created havoc. So ultimately, it makes your floor only so bad as a top-end frontman. Whereas if you were to take 3 slots, let's say, like, here's a good example actually. Bayern Munich, PSG in 22-23. Neymar and Messi. I think they played a front 2. Maybe they had a third guy in there. I don't remember who they had in there. But you can have a third guy in there, regardless of who it is, and they look toothless. They didn't look like they knew what to do. And that's because they didn't have any type of pace. They couldn't get beyond the last line. Everything would have... The only way for them to have won that game would have been to somehow pin Bayern back. And again, they can't do that without Kylian Mbappe because of the fact they didn't have anyone to stretch and run in behind. They didn't have anyone to worry the Bayern defence if they hit a ball over the top. So again, it was impossible for that to happen. So again, it makes your floor as a team lower because of the fact that now you have no threat. PSG were no threat in that entire first leg until Mbappe came on the pitch. Even in the second leg, okay, did they score? No. But they were significantly more threatening with Mbappe on the pitch than they were with Neymar on the pitch. And Messi was still there. So what is it? So, it's an incredibly... pace and power is the defining trait because ultimately it stops you from being penned in and it helps you pin the other team in as well. Even if we look at, say, let's look at probably the 3 best pressure-sustaining teams in the last 15 or so years. 2 were Pep teams, and the other was a Klopp team. So the 2 Pep teams is the Barcelona team, probably 2011. I think we'll isolate 2011, and 23 City were probably the best version of them. 23 or 2019, one of those 2. Let's choose 2019 because they had the higher league points. Let's just use that for the sake of argument. And the other team is 2020 Liverpool. These 3 teams pinned teams back. They had them in a chokehold the entire time. And why was that? It wasn't just because they had elite defensive pieces. It wasn't just because they had fantastic midfield pieces. It's because teams knew if they stepped up, you had Messi, Villa, Pedro, I was about to say Pedri, Messi, Villa and Pedro running at you, especially Messi. Do you want arguably the best transition player in the history of the world running at you when he has all those guys behind him who can dictate possession as well? I'd rather not. 2019 Manchester City, do you really want to get up the pitch when you have Raheem Sterling, who can always kill you running in behind, or sometimes you have Leroy Sané coming in and he can jet in behind, or even the 23 City if you want to use that one, when you're Erling Haaland running into transition spaces behind you. Do you really want that? I don't think you do. And then if we take 2020 Liverpool, you want Mane, Salah and Firmino running at you in space. Good luck. So, these three teams, they could kill you technically, particularly the two City and Barcelona, particularly the Barcelona and City teams, but ultimately, they had elite transition players. They guys who kill you in behind. That is what ultimately scared the opposition into sitting back and sitting on the edge of their own box. They didn't want to give those guys space in behind. So it increases your floor and increases your ceiling as a team. So again, it is something which is absolutely necessary. So, and even if you go down to an individual level, you can be faster and stronger, and you can have better technique. The guy who is faster and stronger doesn't have to be perfect. Let's take... He doesn't have to be perfect throughout the entire stretch of a game. He just doesn't. Because at the end of the day, if he messes up, if you go past him, he can just run back and catch you up. Whereas, let's take Kante and Jorginho, for example. Jorginho, because they played together, and some idiots somehow voted Jorginho as their third best player in the world one year. They two play together. Kante can go past Jorginho. Jorginho can't go past Kante. Kante's a better ball winner. Jorginho can't tackle. Jorginho can't get around the pitch. Kante's got a better passing range too. So maybe he's a bad example, but you get the point. Like, you, as a technical player against an elite physical specimen, you have to be borderline perfect all throughout the entire game. You have to make almost no mistakes, otherwise you are going to get punished. Because of the fact that this guy is so much more impressive than you as an athletic specimen, he's going to kill you. So you better be perfect. Which is ultimately why it makes it super impressive when there's a guy who can't move and can't run and has no physical ability, and when he can dominate a game, it makes it super, super impressive. But those guys are super, super rare. So using those as a barometer is stupid, because you're not going to find those guys. You're not just coming out the sky, are they? It's not like raindrops. Like even then, some of those guys are often overrun by the best physical threats. Anyway, let's take the example I used here. The example I've written down here was 06-07 Liverpool Barcelona. Xavi played in both of those games. Gerrard played in both of those games. Gerrard played him off the park. And when I say played, he ran him off the park. Both games. They won 2-1, they won 2-2 on aggregate on away goals. Because I think Risa or Bellamy scored I don't remember who. Risa and Bellamy scored. I think Deco scored a goal for Barcelona as well. I don't remember who scored the goal in the return leg. But Gerrard was the best midfielder in both of those games due to his physical ability. He went to the Camp Nou and played Xavi for example. And Xavi wasn't a kid at this point. Xavi was 27. Xavi was 1 year away from becoming arguably the best midfielder in the world. He was 1 year away from starting arguably the greatest midfielder peak in the history of the sport. I don't think so, but plenty of people do. And he was still a fantastic player. All the key bases and the fundamentals were already there for Xavi as a player. So it's not like he was a bum. He was still a fantastic all-world player. It's just that he couldn't deal with the physicality, the pace, the power of Steven Gerrard. Do you know what I'm saying here? Like, it was just, he outplayed him with his pace, with his power, with his technique. And ultimately, with midfielders, you need more technique than in other positions due to various reasons and conditions. But nonetheless, you have to be a hugely important player and hugely physically capable player to outdo that to Xavi. And Gerrard did it, which is ultimately, and again, his floor as a player is higher because of the fact that even if his technique is off that game, his pace and power is still there. Defensively, he's still there. In the tackle, he's still there. And he still provides a threat going forward just through his ball carrying, because he's not going to all of a sudden forget how to run with the ball, is he? So again, his floor as a player is higher and his ceiling as a player is higher. So again, that principle. Now, of course, there are exceptions. For example, let's take 2019 Manchester United against PSG. I was there. I was in the crowd when Verratti dog-walked Pogba the entire game. He killed him. He was the best player on the pitch. I sat there, or stood. You don't really sit at Old Trafford. I just stand up the whole game. But I was there, and I saw Verratti just run the whole game by himself. PSG had one midfield. They had Marquinhos as the other midfielder, right? And he was the best player on the pitch by a country mile. Mbappe was good that game. Di Maria was good that game. Draxler was woeful. He was the worst player on the pitch. But forget him. United had some decent performers that day, but Verratti was the guy. And remember, this is Pogba when he legitimately looked like a top 5 player in the world. He was scoring every week. He was creating every week. He was box crashing every single week. He was playing in the 10, dropping deeper, helping out defensively. He was helping control play. He looked like, for a certain stretch, the best player in the league, and arguably, and the best midfielder in the world, and a top 3 to 5 player in the world. Right? The only guys who looked better to that point in that season were Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. Right? That's literally it. No, Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, Van Dijk. And even those, Mbappe and Van Dijk, you could seriously argue with that season. The only 2 who were inarguable to Pogba were Messi and Neymar. That's literally it. And Verratti schooled him. He took a little, he just grabbed him by the collar, like up here, and he just killed him the entire game. He couldn't do anything with him. He got Pogba so frustrated that Pogba got sent off. He got sent off in the last minute for a frustrating tackle. Of course, there are exceptions. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but generally, those examples don't happen very often. And even the best midfielder of all time in the form of Zinedine Zidane, he was a physical freak with technical genius. He was more physically imposing than all of these guys, with the exception of maybe Gerrard. And there's a reason he wanted Gerrard, by the way. And it wasn't because he's pitty-patty like Xavi. It's because of the fact that physical superiority is something which is much harder to scheme against than technical superiority. It's just that simple. And again, like I said, I was there when I saw this happen. But it's just not as often as it should be for how people gas up technical superiority as opposed to physical superiority. Oh, he's just a road runner. Safe. He's going to run your favourite technician off the pitch, though. And it's been happening since the start of time. If we look at the best players of all time, if we look at the best players of each generation, if we look at the absolute GOAT candidates, right, best ever candidates, not GOAT candidates, the 60s and 70s, Pele, physical freak beyond anything else in the world at that point in time. He is arguably the best athlete ever, according to stats and study, just pure athlete. I don't think he is. I think that honour belongs to LeBron James. That's a whole different conversation. Diego Maradona, ran like the wind, strong, pacey, powerful, absolute freak athlete. And then go skip another 10 years, Brazilian Ronaldo. Maybe the biggest physical phenom that we've seen in the sport because he was 6 foot, big, burly, strong, and he had the turning radius of a 5'6" guy. Absolute freak, and he was strong as an ox. Lionel Messi, physical freak, burst, athleticism, top end speed. Cristiano Ronaldo, we know what he is. He's an absolute demon going forward. And I'm just talking about the consensus best of each generation. Kylian Mbappe, he's clearly the best player of this generation. He's a total physical freak. Explosiveness, top end speed, agility, ability to just zoom out of a cannon straight away. Might be the quickest first step we've seen in the sport. All these players are physical freaks, as great as they are technically. It's not a new thing. It never has been. The best midfielders have also always been physical freaks. Even if we look at, say, like Zidane, physical freak. Even if you want to say Gerrard, physical freak. Even today, De Bruyne, physical freak. Okay, you don't want to class him as a midfielder. Fine. There's other, like Pogba for those small stretches. He was an absolute physical freak. Patrick Vieira, physical freak. Roy Keane was one of the best midfielders around. He is the best Manchester United midfielder ever, not Paul Scholes. He's better than Paul Scholes. He's a physical freak. N'Golo Kante, who might be the finest international midfielder of the last 10 years. He was a physical freak. All these guys are absolute physical phenoms. This is just a new sensation where people like to disregard it. I don't know, maybe you like to romanticize players who have the same athleticism level as you. I don't know, but the best players have always been physical phenoms. And it makes you far easier to scale. Like, it's just always been a thing. And the way that people try and disregard pace and power is flat stupid. Like, ultimately, football is, outside of American football, the biggest pitch around. And in American football, you don't have to cover the same areas of field as you do in football, because of the fact that in American football you're shaded to zones, or you're following a man. So you're following a man who runs specific patterns. You only have to cover, and it's intensity. I think American football athletes are some of the finest athletes in the world. I think they're more impressive than footballers, to be honest. But at the end of the day, you have to have more stamina and cardiovascular to be able to play football. So it's always been a running sport. So people are trying to make it a new thing stupid. But you have to run to get across the pitch. Which brings me to the next thing. So someone asked me, because they knew I was going to do this, and it was forwards and defenders and fielders. So when it comes to pace and power with forwards and defenders, people generally don't give you much pushback. People understand the importance of having a guy who can blitz a guy offensively going forward, whether it be blitzing forward, but blitzing the centre back, things like that. And people understand the importance of having defenders who can defend in space, which is why all of the consensus best defenders of the last few generations, especially, have always been guys who can defend in space. Maldini, Nesta, you want to take Cannavaro. PK was an excellent defender in space. Ramos couldn't move, even if he was overly rash in space. Rafa Varane, Virgil van Dijk. All those, like Ibu Konate, he's one of the best channel defenders today. All of these guys are absolute physical freaks and they can defend in space. People always understand the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Defenders especially, it's rare that someone evaluates a defender wrong, unless they're talking about their own team. Then you get some weird hippie saying Alessandro Martinez is one of the best centre-backs in the world. I'm lost when people say that nonsense. But when it comes to midfielders, people tend to ignore it a bit more. People like people's favourite midfield trio ever tends to be Xavi, Busquets and Iniesta. Because they are under the illusion, which is absolutely ridiculous, that those guys were all little twinks who couldn't move, right? They're just small guys who can't move and they've got no athleticism. Like, Busquets couldn't move, right? Don't get me wrong. And he wasn't very strong either, but he was a good tackler. Iniesta had a motor to end all motors. That guy never stopped running. He was always up and down the pitch. And Xavi, also, again, another guy who couldn't move with the same velocity as Iniesta, but he never stopped running. He was never static. He was never in the same position at once. He was very subtle. He would cover lots of ground at very intense speeds, and he'd always close you down quicker than you thought you would, because his technique was fantastic, and his angle of his body, and his know when to go, when to stay, all those things. Absolutely fantastic. That's everyone's favourite midfielder the last 20 years. And we look at the other one in Madrid, Casemiro, Modric, Kroos. Okay, Casemiro. Everyone knows what he represents. Everyone knows that he is an absolute monster physically. Modric on the right side of the trio. Everyone knows that Modric is a fantastic mover due to his time in England. Toni Kroos, people see as some sloth. Toni Kroos was solid in the duel, and even before he moved on, again, he was clearly the weakling. Out of all these six midfielders, he's more than Busquets. But again, he wasn't overly bad on tackling. He knew where to be and when to be there. But 4 of these 6 midfielders are inarguably elite movers. Like, there's no debate over it. And even Toni Kroos, earlier in his career, he could move well. So of the 6, the only guy who couldn't move is Busquets. And I would argue that 2009 Barcelona has a serious case of being better than 2011 due to the higher degree of individual quality. And they played Torre at large stretches at the number 6. So, again, if we take that in, we have 6 midfielders, and all 6 of them, inarguably, are not bad athletes. At certain points in their career. Maybe not as a trio, but at certain points of their career, they were all fine athletes. So, and here's the other thing when it comes to midfielders. If you can't move, there's only you're a cone defensively. Genuinely, you're a cone. You can be hidden somewhat, because if you have elite movers all around you, like Madrid did with Toni Kroos, like Barcelona did with Sergio Busquets, but you're still a cone. And when teams get to you, they're still going to target you. So unless you're good in the tackle, you're totally useless. So you need to have either pace or power. If I pick one, I would take pace. Without much hesitation, to be honest with you. But on the whole, when people say that pace is useless in the midfield, I think they're stupid. If I were to build a midfield 3, I would, without hesitation, take 3 Bellinghams before 3 Pirlos. And I mean 3 peak Pirlos, and I mean 3 peak Bellinghams. You know why? Bellingham is not very good at 6, right? He's not great in terms of what you would require a number 6 to do. But he's good enough, Jesus Christ. He can at least cover the ground, he can get a foot in, he can enable you to stop opposition attacks. Because in fact, one Bellingham is like having 2 players on the pitch. They're having 2 of them on the pitch. Having 3 is like having 6. No one's moving anywhere. Or even if you want to take Kante, because he's more of a box-to-box guy anyway. You give me 3 Kantes, I'm smoking you. I don't care who you have. Give me 3 Gerrards, I'm smoking you. I don't care who you have. Have Pirlo, Xavi, Kroos. Have Pirlo, Busquets, Kroos. Have Pirlo, Busquets, and who's another sloth? Verratti's a bit of a sloth, even though he's great in the duel. I'll kill you. Simple. Like, I can get the ball up the pitch well enough for Kante. I can get the ball up the pitch fantastically well, but Gerrard can play 6, 8, 10, so I'm sort of cheating, but still. It would be too easy. Because of the fact that they would just bully you and obliterate you physically. Now, of course, you need a higher technical floor in midfield than you do at the other end of the pitch. As a striker, you can get away with just being a good finisher and having a poor first touch. As a defender, you can get away with not being very good on the ball. Even today, I don't care what anyone says, you can still get away with it. Look at Varane, he's stiff as a brick. Look at Konate, he's stiff, he's not very good on the ball. But he's better than Upamecano, who's fantastic who's on the ball. So, what are you going to do? So, defensively, and I'm a pragmatist, right? Give me someone who can stop the goals as opposed to someone who can initiate them when it comes to attack. I mean, just let the attackers do their job, right? They're good enough, especially on the best teams in the world. Which is ultimately what we're talking about. We're not talking about someone who can do a job for bloody Bristol here, are we? So, if you can be overrun easily, I don't know, what utility do you have to me? Because I'm going to lose every midfield duel. Every big game, the midfielders will decide everything. And every big game, almost every big game, the team with the superior athletes in midfield wins. Who's the consensus best midfielder in the world today? Bellingham and Rodri. Those two. Rodri is not a fantastic mover, but he moves well enough, and he's powerful in the tackle, and he's 6'2", and he's strong, and he's a unit. Bellingham, we know what he is. He's an absolute freak. What are we talking about here? It's always been a big thing. Athleticism has always been the defining factor when it comes to the best players in football. And anyone who's acting like it's not, it's just a bit... Like, you have this weird hyperfixation on little small guys with small, tiny circles. It's just weird. Yeah, I don't know. And like I said, I think it's probably just because you guys relate to them more than anything else. Like, you feel comfortable watching players who remind you of yourself, as opposed to watching actual physical freaks on the pitch. I don't know, watch badminton or something. That's full with like people who aren't massively strong. Like they just got excellent fundamentals. But even then, they move super well. Well, I don't know. Like, it's a weird one. I don't know. MMA, you don't need to be a superb athlete, I suppose, because you can be a fantastic wrestler if you're good enough. When it comes to kicking and punching, you can be decent. I don't know. I've never done it. How did he? I don't know. Who knows? But yeah, you have to be good at either pace or power, man. Like, because it makes you be portable. It makes you be able to scale and fit with other players. Like, it's just insane to me when people just disregard it. Like, Aaron Ramsey is one of the best midfielders in the past 20 years. And people just totally disregard him because he's not the cleanest looking technically. They prefer Wilshere when it's genuinely not even close. Ramsey's so much better than Wilshere. Wilshere is just a nicer, cleaner, technical player. But Ramsey's so much better. But yeah, I don't know. That is like... Pace and power has always been the most valuable thing in sports. It's a running game. And anyone who disregards it, on the whole, like generally you have a few exceptions. But on the whole, if you disregard it, you're just a bit silly. So, yeah, it's what it is. But yeah, pace and power is the most valuable thing in the sport, and it always has been. And it, as a base level, if you can run, you're going to have some sort of utility, right? If you can run and you can pass. Remember Roy Keane saying, I was told, if I win the ball a lot, and get myself around the pitch, and I win a bunch of duels, and I take the ball, pass the ball onto a better guy, take the ball, pass the ball onto a different player, I can make a good career. And look at Roy Keane. He's the best midfielder in Manchester United history. I don't know. Don't take my word for it. If you really insist on taking other people's opinions instead of forming your own. But hey. So, one of the questions I got, so as always I end with questions. So, why do... I'm going to leave this one for next week, actually. So, just ending with two today because I'm already at 45 minutes. I don't want to take too much longer. So, on the potential of Rafael Leao and what he could achieve. So, my view on Leao is that Leao, I think, is the second most talented player in the world. I think of all the players playing today, he is the second highest ceiling. I think that Mbappe is, number one, as a lot of you will know. And I think Leao is number two. Now, of course, Vinny and Haaland and a few other guys, in terms of if everyone reaches their max level, they can be there too. But I think Leao, if everyone reaches their maximum level, I think Rafael Leao will be the best. And even when he plays at his peak level, peak capacity, you see that. Where, say, take the PSG game at the San Siro last season, for example. He was the best player on the pitch, and that was probably the second or third. Just raw performance. Vinicius's was the best overall when you evaluate, when you attach context and things like that. But in terms of overall raw performance, Leao's was better than that, and it was probably the second most performance in the entire tournament. I think it was Leao versus PSG in the first leg, or Bellingham against Napoli as the second best, and Mbappe against Sociedad in the return leg as the best. So he goes back to what I said earlier. Again, his floor as a player is stupidly high with the pace because he's so fast, he's so powerful. When he gets running, you can't stop him. He's strong, he's fast, He's wonderful technique. He's got wonderful he's got ballerina type balance. He's a great finisher. He's got wonderful crossing. He's got 2 good feet. In transition, he's a monster. So his floor is always good, and he's always going to worry teams going the other way. And you always have to plan for him. But ultimately, he doesn't get enough. He doesn't have enough final action. He doesn't create enough shot creating. He's not involved in enough shot creating actions. He's not involved in enough goal creating actions. Now, partially that is to do with the system, without doubt. Right, part of it is because of the fact that he has not. Now we'll have to see this season. I think Pioli's gone. They've got a different coach in. I thought they might have sold him this season. I think next season might be the one to sell him. I don't know. But Leao is someone who get him in the right system. Get him isolated one-on-ones over and over and over. Get him in a place where he can run in semi-transitions on a regular basis, carry the entire load. Get him in situations where he is secondary playmakers and he can just receive the ball 30 to 40 yards from goal and he can just run at people and see what happens. Because of the fact that he's one of the best dribblers in the world and he's one of the strongest and fastest players in the world and he's one of the most dangerous players in transition in the world. Why would you not look to take advantage of that? He's and even in the Euros, he was probably Portugal's best player, honestly, when he was on. Unfortunately, he didn't get the ball to him enough, so it didn't look like it. But particularly in the game against Slovenia and the game against France, he was the best player for Portugal who looked most likely to break the deadlock. And they took him off and all of a sudden they looked toothless again. Shock! Because again, he's your most dangerous player. He's the game breaker. Out of all of it, Ronaldo, he can't move anymore. Give him a pass. Bernardo, Bruno, these aren't game breakers in the same way that a guy like Leao is. Because again, he can run at players and draw attention to himself and create space for those other guys. He needs to take more responsibility and go to a team which gives him more responsibility. If he does not, then he will not reach his potential and he won't be the second best player in the world. Now ultimately, this comes up here as well. Because physically and technically he's there. Mentally and tactically he's not. Tactically he's relatively easy to get there in the right system. He just needs to get the right mental state and coaching there. Get him with Pep, get him with Arteta, get him with a Klopp. Even a Flick would get the best out of him. The reason I named those 4 teams is because I think they're where he should go. Well, obviously Klopp's gone now, but Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Barca. Barcelona have obviously been linked to him as of this week. They're broke. I don't know how they're going to get hold of him, but I don't know. They do weird levers and stuff. Like, I don't know. Their gear shift in a car doesn't like they have like 15 gears or whatever. Like, they break gearbox. They've invented their own gearbox or whatever. Yeah, they pull all sorts of weird stuff. So I don't know how they end up there, but him and Levy with your man on the other side, that'd be quite nasty. And you have a guy who goes on the outside and the fullback. Yeah, they'd be tough. Arsenal and City, the fit I think is fairly self-explanatory. These are teams which sustain pressure to a super, super high level. Teams which pin the opposition back and he'd get an absolute ton of one-on-one opportunities. The question is, would they allow him to run at the guys one-on-one without telling him off? I don't know, because of the fact that they don't like losing the ball. Now, Guardiola I think would give him more license to, because of the fact that Guardiola, if you lose the ball in the opposition's final third, he doesn't mind it as much. He will just get you to stem the counter-attack. Arteta, on the other hand, is a total sociopath who, if you lose the ball, you're more likely to get dropped down. You're more likely to get dropped and sit for the next 3 weeks than you are to play, than you are to even see out the game. It's like if you lose the ball to an excessive amount in the final third, I don't know. Arteta sapped, but I think he's more likely to end up at Arsenal, honestly, which is a shame. Or I don't know, maybe Arteta would actually give him license because of the fact that he is such a game breaker and he's a bigger talent than anyone else they have in the squad. I don't know. Or would Leao find Arteta playing parachute in the dressing room stupid and start laughing? I don't know. Maybe he'd make him go through some weird ritual before he even signs him. I don't know. Liverpool, this is the most sense when it comes, because Liverpool play more football, right? They're a lot more relaxed. They're not as hyper-fixated on the system. They're a lot more based on the individual, even just based on what we've seen earlier from Slot. Him, Salah, and Nunez, or Jota, or Gakpo, whoever you want in the central spot between him and Salah would be absolutely ridiculous. Salah feeding him passes going beyond, and Leao attacking and getting crosses into the box for Nunez, and them sustaining pressure, which they managed to do well, and him getting crossed to the box, he'd be silly. So that's the most natural fit for him, but that's also the least likely place he goes because of the fact that they won't pay the money and they probably won't pay the wages, which match what City, Arsenal, and Barcelona will be offering. So yeah, those are the 4 places which I think are most likely to end up. I think Arsenal's probably the most likely, honestly. Which is a shame because of what I mentioned. But at the same time, I can just as easily see him staying at Milan for the rest of his career, because he just doesn't seem like a player who's overly obsessed with winning. He's won a league as the best player. I think he was a player of the season in another tournament. Maybe he's just chill with his lot. Get paid a bunch of money, leave. I can see him going to Saudi at 29, 28, 20, maybe 30. Getting a bunch of money and just seeing out the rest of his career, retiring about 34. I don't know, we'll have to see. I hope I'm wrong because I love watching him, but hey. So, and the final question I'm going to answer today is, what do I think is the next big progression in football? So I don't think there is necessarily progressions in the sport, because I think everything's been done before. It's like, I can't remember who said it, but I remember reading it one time. It's everything that has been done, everything that will be done has already been done. I think it was, I can't remember who it was. I watched it on some podcast a few weeks ago. So everything that has been done, everything that will be done has already been done before, just far, far, far back. And in football, that also occurs just on a much smaller scale because the game's only existed for a few hundred years. If that is it even 200? I don't know. I know the FA was created in the 80s. Is it? I might be wrong. But nonetheless, so I think it's essentially what I'm trying to say is I think it moves in cycles. And I think the next cycle will be it cycles back to number 10s. Because we're already seeing the transition back to wide wingers. Wingers who play on their strong foot or wingers who stick and hold width. Those guys, they look to stay wide, stay high on the pitch, and that opens up space for the guys in the middle of the pitch. Now, obviously at the moment you have a midfield trio which largely operates it, and sometimes, or you have the box, right? You have the 2 and the 2. Sometimes they invert the fullback and they come in, and you have one midfielder joining the other going up, so you create 2. I don't like sometimes whatever they end up doing, right? But with the way that defenses can be stretched now, and the way that teams are going back to utilising crosses a huge amount over the last 3 to 4 years, and the way that teams, particularly in the last 1 to 2 years, are valuing wings staying wide and creating spaces up in the middle, and teams follow Pep for the most part, and Pep is looking to get the value and utility out of that. That will create spaces in the middle of the pitch for a number 10 to open up. And I get we already have number 10s in the form of Bruno, De Bruyne, Bellingham, guys like that. But when I say number 10, I don't mean the box crashers. Like Frank Lampard made his return in the form of those guys. When I say a number 10, I mean the guy like a Baggio, a Laudrup, an Ozil, a James Rodriguez, those types of guys. I think those guys will come back purely because of the fact that there will be so much more space in the middle of the pitch. Now, it will be stuck in blocks, so it won't be as much space as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But there will be enough space where the guy can pick up the ball, turn, and the 10s are going to be much more passing based. They're not going to be as much relying on their dribbling, which is fine. It's not a problem. Those will be much more based on elite level passing ability. So we're more likely to get probably a Zidane type who, in the actual final third and things like that, because Zidane wasn't a huge dribbler in the final third. He was huge when it comes to actually carrying the ball up the pitch. So yeah, that's what I think will be the next big progression, if you will. The number 10 makes a return as a passer, but as a guy who keeps the connective tissue flowing. It won't be a pure maverick, a guy who's willing to take huge amounts of chances as opposed to just low percentage things which end the attack. So like say De Bruyne will take a lot of low percentage actions, which don't actually come off. But they're not mavericks, they're hard workers who go on both ends. Bruno being a less winning player than De Bruyne for reasons I went into a couple of weeks ago, but you get the point. But yeah, that will be the next big progression. So I had another question, but I'm going to leave that one for next week because that's probably quite long and this is already coming up on an hour and I don't want this to go much beyond that. So, if you guys have any questions for next week, feel free to ask in the comments. And otherwise, today is Saturday and I'll get this up later today. And otherwise, I will speak to you next week. I'll speak to you soon.